in a world that is embedded with polytheistic and henotheistic theologies. No monotheism yet. There's no even understanding of monotheism at that point, arguably. Okay? Okay. God spoke to Moses and said to him, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty by my name. I'm continuing. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, where they were living as resident foreigners. I have also heard the groaning of the Israelites, whom the Egyptians are enslaving, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore tell the Israelites, I am the Lord. I will bring you out from your enslavement to the Egyptians. I will rescue you from the hard labor they impose, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgment. I will take you to myself, listen to this, for a people. I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from Egypt, blah, blah, blah. You know this. At the end, I will bring you to the land I swore to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and I will give it to you as a possession. Three elements to remember here that are very important in a polytheistic and henotheistic structure. Each nation has its own gods. In other words, there is a direct association between divinity and the human arena, and that association is usually divided by nations. We have the gods of the Edomites, we have the gods of the Moabites, we have the gods of this, we have the god of that, and lo and behold, we have the God of Israel, whose name is the God of Israel.
There's only one God.
Wait, there is. But he is yet the God of Israel, and more than that. What is the sphere of influence of the gods of Egypt? What would you think in a polytheistic system?
The universal.
No. Egypt. You know, the funny thing, let me give you a nice absurdity or irony. Polytheists are much less likely to be anti-Semites than monotheists. Because another addition of one god to their arsenal is not much of a threat. By the way, if you actually read some of the literature of the Roman army from the period that they conquered the land here, during the days of the Roman revolt, of the Jewish revolt against the Romans had no problem with the temple. You want to worship? Go ahead, worship. We do it all the time. They had many other problems with the Jews. Some of them not surprising.
That's why I would say that polytheism actually has got a more universal nature to the concept of deity. It's not...
No, not at all. On the contrary, it has a regional understanding, and therefore it's tolerant of other regions and other deities. When you read the Bible for you, and we'll see it today, there were the gods of the Philistines, the gods of the Edomites, the gods of these, and they were all in some sort of contact through the nations. But the nations understood that their God governed over them, and governed over them in a very particular sphere of influence, and that is Moab, Edom, Tarshish, Lebanon, what have you. Israel is no different.
Was the understanding that those gods were in relationship with each other?
Depends who you ask. But actually, if you, for example, look at ancient tablets from Tel Dan, you find depictions that on the left say Asherah, which is a name we'll see here, and on the right say Jehovah. Now I cannot tell you, and I will not because it's irresponsible, that this Jehovah is the Jehovah that we understand as Jehovah. And I hope I'm not offending anyone by using that name, right? But this is not that. But however, we do understand that there is something there that is not mentioned as an Edomite deity. So what is going on? And what happens when you read, for example, Psalms that says, Yoshev Elohim be'adat el bekerev Elohim yishpot. God sits in the assembly of divine beings, and in the presence of other gods, he passes judgment. Interesting. In other words, there is a perception based on sometimes political relations about also the way the divinities are corresponding with one another. So it's not surprising that when you have a social conflict, it comes first and foremost in the ancient world in the terms of a theological conflict. My God is stronger than your God.
Isn't El like above or something?
No, El be'alef. Above is Al, with an Ain. It's a different word. El is not even necessarily a Hebrew word. But I don't want to go there. If I have a session about the use of Hebrew in classical Judaism, you're welcome to come. No, but the notion of El, by the way, is not necessarily a Hebrew word. And El was not only a name for a Hebrew deed. It's much more complicated. What I want to stay on right now is for you to understand a few things. When we, for example, take the example of the Exodus, what does God tell Moses to do? Do you remember? Don't even look at the text. Go and tell Pharaoh,
let my people go.
Let my people go where?
Out.
Out where? Out where?
Out to the desert to worship God.
How many days do you remember? 3. Nahor, exactly. Now I want you to listen to it from a polytheist's ear. My God is telling you, and by the way, do not forget that he's talking to a pharaoh, and a pharaoh perceives himself already as a demigod. Don't forget that. The audacity of such a statement by a mortal to come to a demigod and say, my God is commanding you to send his people from your God's sphere of influence so they can worship him. And I'm telling it to you in your palace. You're surprised that Pharaoh is pissed off? He's not just angry at the audacity. This is a theological onslaught. One step further. If you fail to do so, I'm going to completely demolish your theological structure. What do you think, my friends? That it's a coincidence that one of the plagues is hitting the Nile? You think it's a coincidence that one of the plagues is completely destroying Ra, the same king of Akhenaten? You think it's a coincidence that all these things happen? You think that they were chosen arbitrarily? No, my friends. What happens here is a subtext that needs to be understood in context. My God, who is my only God, it's not your God. At this juncture, they still accept. Moses has no problem with the gods of the Egyptians. And by the way, if you follow those texts, you'll see that out of the 10 plagues, the first three, the magicians emulate. And nowhere in the Bible it says that God allowed them to emulate. It doesn't say that. It says in their own secret magic, they were able to turn the staff into a snake. They were able to turn the river Nile into blood. They were able. In other words, there is a recognition of magical abilities and divine endorsement of other nations. That's not the case of monotheism yet. What we have is a case of a single God, who is my God, unlike your many gods, who is going to strike on your gods in your home field unless you let me go and worship him in his land. The reason the God of Israel wants the people of Israel to go to the land of Israel is because in the ancient world, that was the only place that he could be their God. That's how it's understood. If you have a God and you are a nation, where is your sacred land? Where is the land that God governs? Hence the term, the God of Israel. Up to this point, I'm pretty sure when you heard the name God of Israel, you heard the God of the people of Israel. In the ancient world, it also meant the God of the land of Israel. So what is happening here is a theological onslaught. I'm going to hit the Nile. Here's a question for you. Anybody knows the origin of the pyramid, the pharaonic pyramids? Where did they come from? Anybody knows? And don't give me alien bullshit stuff. And it has nothing to do with geometry anyway. The geometrical precision is a part of brilliant architecture and other things, but it is not the impetus for the pyramid. Do you know where the pyramid comes from? I'll tell you where it comes from. The Nile would expand and recede periodically like it does, right, into the delta. When the Nile receded, it left on the banks pyramid-shaped hills because of the movement of the sand, of the water on the sand. The Egyptians, an agricultural system, perceived those pyramids as a divine pledge to the next time of expansion and water. Hence, enlarging the whole concept for a cosmic pledge of rejuvenation for their pharaoh. That's it. That's where it comes from. No little green people. But what I want you to understand here, I'll come to you in a minute. What I want you to understand here, that when the plague hits the Nile, it doesn't only hit a source of water, which is important in of itself. It hits a theological construction.